billionaire discovers a child reading in his library at 3 a.m. She wasn't supposed to be there. She broke his rules. What he did next, no one saw coming. In a $50 million penthouse, silence isn't just golden, it's mandatory. Here, billionaire Walter Harrington rules an empire built on one belief. There are those who take, and those who are taken from. He is a taker, but at 3 a.m., his absolute control is broken by a single, faint sound. A click. It comes from his private library, a room where no one should be. He expects an intruder. What he finds is the night shift cleaner's daughter, hiding in the dark, poring over a complex book he cannot understand. A girl who should be invisible. A girl who sees everything. And he just made a fatal mistake. He underestimated her. Before we start, I'd love to know where you're joining from. Let me know in the comments. I hope you love this story. He found the child reading a book he himself could not understand. Billionaire Walter Harrington demanded absolute silence in his $50 million penthouse, a fortress of glass and steel that hovered over the city. But tonight, at 3 o'clock in the morning, a tiny sound had broken that silence. The sound was a faint click. It was not the sound of a settling pipe. It was not the hum of the climate control. Walter Harrington knew every sound in his home, just as he knew every asset in his vast portfolio. This sound was wrong. He had just returned from a late-night dinner, a celebration of a deal that would add another 100 million to his name. At 58, Walter had built an empire from nothing, or so he told the magazines. He believed the world was divided into two types of people, those who take, and those who are taken from. He was a taker. His tailored suit cost more than most people made in a year. His shoes, handmade in Italy, made no sound on the imported marble floors. He moved from his private elevator toward the grand library. The penthouse was dark, save for the blue-white glow of the city lights far below. Another click. It came from the library. Walter's eyes narrowed. He paid a premium for the best security. No one should be here. His personal staff, his chef, his assistants, they all left by 10 p.m. The only person allowed in the penthouse this late was the night shift cleaner, a woman whose name he had never bothered to learn. He entered the library. The room was massive, lined with thousands of books he had never read. They were for appearances. And there, in the far corner, he saw it. A small, bobbing light, like a firefly. It was hidden behind the large globe he kept by the window. Walter moved silently, his irritation growing. Was the cleaner stealing from him? He rounded the globe, his sharp voice cutting through the dark. What in God's name are you doing? The light snapped off. For a moment, there was only the sound of breathing. Then, the person spoke. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't hear you come in. It was a small voice. A child's voice. Walter flipped the main light switch. The room flooded with harsh, bright light. She was sitting on the floor, tucked between the globe and a bookshelf. She looked tiny, perhaps 9 or 10 years old. She had pale blonde hair, pulled back in a simple braid. She wore worn-out sneakers and a faded hoodie. Around her, on the floor, were not cleaning supplies, but books. Thick, heavy books. And in her lap, the book she had been reading with a small keychain flashlight. Walter stared at the cover. His mind, usually so quick with numbers and deals, struggled to make sense of it. The principles of quantum mechanics. Where is your mother? Walter demanded. The girl did not flinch. She looked up at him with the most unsettling eyes he had ever seen. They were a deep, serious blue. They held no fear, only a calm, quiet assessment. She is in the kitchen, sir, the girl replied. Her voice was steady. She is polishing the silver. She said she would be done in 1 hour. I don't pay her to babysit, Walter snapped. He pointed at the book in her lap. And I certainly don't let children play in my library. Is this some kind of joke? What are you doing with that? The girl looked down at the book, then back at him. I am reading it, sir. Walter let out a short, cold laugh. Reading it? Of course. And I suppose you understand it, too? Quantum mechanics. The girl's expression did not change. Most of it, sir. I am struggling with the Copenhagen interpretation. Heisenberg's uncertainty principle is clear, but Bohr's concept of complementarity, it feels incomplete. Walter Harrington went completely still. He looked from the girl's face to the book. He had a physics degree from Yale. He had been forced to take a similar class. He had barely passed, scraping by with a C-. He remembered nothing but headaches. He was looking at a 10-year-old girl in a worn-out hoodie, who was calmly discussing Niels Bohr as if he were a character in a cartoon. Who are you? he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. I am Abigail Grant, sir. My mother is Emily Grant. Get her, Walter commanded. Now. Abigail slowly and carefully placed a bookmark, a simple, folded piece of paper, into the dense textbook. She stood up, her movements unhurried. She gathered the other books she had pulled from his shelves. One was a history of the Roman Empire. Another was a college-level calculus textbook. She walked out of the library, leaving Walter alone in the sudden, bright light. He felt a strange, cold sensation in his chest. He looked at the book she had left. He picked it up. It was heavy. He opened it to the page she had marked. The page was covered in equations that looked like a foreign language. He heard frantic, hurried footsteps. A moment later, a woman rushed into the room, wringing her hands. She wore the simple gray uniform of the cleaning service. This was Emily Grant. She was pale, her eyes wide with terror. Mr. Harrington, sir, I am so sorry. I am so sorry. She was not supposed to leave the staff kitchen. I promise. Emily was 40 years old, with the same blonde hair as her daughter, though hers was streaked with gray and pulled into a tight, tired bun. She had been working for Walter for 6 months. She was an excellent cleaner. Efficient, quiet, invisible. Until now. She was in here, Walter said, his voice flat. Reading my books. Stealing, in effect. No, sir. Not stealing. Emily rushed forward, clasping her hands. She just loves to read. She's very smart. She would never take anything. I swear on my life. She had to come with me tonight, Mr. Harrington. Emily pleaded, her voice cracking. She had a fever this morning. I couldn't leave her alone and I cannot afford to lose this shift. The agency is very strict. I made her a small bed in the staff kitchen. I told her to sleep. I just turned my back for a minute. Walter looked at the woman. He saw weakness. He saw desperation. He despised both. You brought a sick child into my home. She's fine now, sir. The fever broke. She's just quiet. She just reads. Please, Mr. Harrington. It will never happen again. Abigail had reappeared in the doorway. She stood silently, watching her mother plead. Her face was a mask of perfect, cold calm. It certainly will not happen again, Walter said. He looked past the mother to the child. You, he said to Abigail, think you're clever, don't you? Reading big books. Playing grown-up. Abigail said nothing. Let me teach you a lesson, child, Walter said, stepping closer. He felt his power returning. It doesn't matter how many books you read. It doesn't matter what you think you know. In this world, you are either born to rule, or you are born to serve. People like you serve. You clean toilets. You polish silver. You do not read quantum physics in my library. Emily Grant gasped, a hand flying to her mouth. Sir, please. She is just a child. She is a child who needs to learn her place, Walter said, his voice like ice. Just like her mother. A flicker of something new crossed Emily's face. Her fear was replaced by a spark of steel. My place, Mr. Harrington? My place is doing an honest night's work. It's raising my daughter to be better than me. My father fought for this country. He was a good man. He taught us that there is no shame in work. Your father, Walter scoffed, was probably some grunt who followed orders. I give orders. That is the difference. That is the place you fail to understand. That was when it happened. For the first time, the girl, Abigail, reacted. Her head snapped up. Her blue eyes, no longer calm, fixed on Walter Harrington. The look was not one of childish anger. It was a look of pure, concentrated ice. It was a look of sudden, terrible understanding. Walter felt that cold prickle in his chest again. For a half-second, he felt like he was the one being analyzed. Abby, no, her mother whispered, grabbing her arm. Let's go. You are fired, of course, Walter said, turning his back on them both. He waved a hand dismissively. I want you out of my building in 5 minutes. I will inform the agency you are never to be allowed on my properties again. Sir, please. I need this job, Emily cried. 5 minutes, Walter repeated, walking toward his bar to pour himself a drink. He heard the mother begin to sob, a quiet, defeated sound. He heard her take her daughter's hand. Come on, baby. We have to get our things. He listened to their footsteps retreat. The mother's, hurried and broken. The daughter's, slow and measured. As she reached the doorway, Abigail stopped. She turned and looked back at Walter Harrington. He was standing with his back to her, admiring the city lights, a glass of expensive brandy in his hand. She did not say a word, but her mind was working. She was not just a girl who liked physics. Abigail Grant had a gift her mother called her memory trick. Doctors called it eidetic memory. Abigail called it the library in her head. She never forgot anything she saw or heard. For 6 months, while waiting for her mother to finish her shifts, she had been watching. She had waited in the staff kitchen. But sometimes, her mother had let her sit quietly in the study while she vacuumed the main hall. Abigail had seen the papers on Walter's desk. She had seen the diagrams on his whiteboards. She had overheard the phone calls he took on his speakerphone, where he shouted about zoning changes and leveraged buyouts. To her, they were just shapes and sounds, puzzles, numbers. But tonight, the man who owned those numbers had insulted her mother. And, worse, he had insulted her grandfather. Michael Grant was not some grunt. He was a decorated war hero. He was the kindest, strongest man Abigail had ever known. He was the one who taught her to read. He was the one who told her that her mind was a gift, not a burden. As Abigail stood in the doorway, she looked at the desk across the hall. She saw a file left open. She saw a name, Harrington Global, and next to it, a list of other names, ones she didn't recognize. Apex Holdings, Clearwater Investments, Project Nightingale. She took a mental picture. Click. She looked at the whiteboard in his study, the one he hadn't erased. It was a map of money, moving between boxes. Click. She remembered the phone call from last week, when Mr. Harrington had laughed and said, "Councilman Davies is greedier than he looks. Double the consulting fee, and the waterfront project is ours." Click. Abigail Grant turned and walked away. She was not just a girl who understood quantum physics. She was a girl who now had a reason to understand Walter Harrington. And he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. Walter Harrington watched the elevator doors slide shut. He heard the faint sound of Emily Grant sobbing on the other side. Incompetence, he muttered to himself. He took a long sip of his brandy. The liquid was smooth and fiery, costing $2,000 a bottle. It usually calmed him. Tonight, it did not. He walked back into the library. He looked at the chair where the small, blonde girl had been sitting. He saw the book she had left on the floor, The Principles of Quantum Mechanics. He nudged it with his expensive shoe. Heisenberg, he scoffed. Bore? Ridiculous. He felt a sudden, sharp spike of irritation. It was not anger at the child. It was the faint, nagging feeling that he was the one who had been looked down on. That calm, blue-eyed stare. It had not been fearful. It had been analytical, as if he were the specimen under a microscope. A 10-year-old, he said aloud, his voice echoing in the empty room. He grabbed the book and shoved it violently back onto the shelf. He did not care that he put it in the wrong place. He was Walter Harrington. He did not make mistakes. He crushed them. He finished his drink, put the woman and her strange child out of his mind, and went to his study. He had a deal to close. The waterfront project was moving forward. He picked up the phone to call his lawyers, forgetting entirely about the diagram he had left on his whiteboard. Inside the elevator, the moment the polished brass doors closed, Emily Grant's legs gave out. She slumped against the mahogany-paneled wall and slid to the floor, her sobs echoing in the small, confined space. "Oh, Abby. Oh, my girl, what are we going to do?" The elevator was descending. 50 floors. 49, 48. I've lost it. I've lost the best-paying job I've ever had. Oh, Lord. The rent is due on the 1st. The electric bill. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking. He was such a vile man. Abigail did not cry. She stood perfectly still, watching the numbers light up as they fell. 40, 39. She was not thinking about the rent. She was not thinking about the electric bill. In her mind, she was still in the penthouse. She was rewatching the scene, like a movie. She saw Mr. Harrington's face. She heard his voice. "You are born to serve. You clean toilets." And she was reviewing the data she had collected. The whiteboard in his study. It was a flow chart. A box at the top labeled H Global. Arrows pointed down to 3 smaller boxes. Apex Holdings. Clearwater Investments. Project Nightingale. Money moved from the small boxes to the big one. But arrows also pointed sideways to a box labeled CD Consulting. Click. The file on his desk. Open. A list of property deeds. All along the waterfront. Click. The phone call from last week. She had been quietly reading in the kitchen, but he used his speakerphone. His voice was loud, booming. "Councilman Davies is greedier than he looks. Double the consulting fee, and the waterfront project is ours. CD Councilman Davies. The elevator chimed softly, opening to the grand, empty lobby. The night security guard, a man named Frank, looked up from his desk. He saw Emily's tear-streaked face. He looked at Abigail, pale and silent. Mrs. Grant? Everything all right. Frank was a kind man. He always gave Abigail a piece of hard candy when she came in. I've been let go, Frank, Emily whispered, pulling her thin jacket tighter. Frank's face fell. He knew what a late-night firing from Mr. Harrington meant. Oh, Emily. I'm so sorry. It's 3:30 in the morning. How are you getting home? The bus, Emily said, wiping her eyes. We'll be fine. The last bus doesn't run for another hour, Frank said, looking at the clock. Here. He pulled a $10 bill from his wallet. Take a cab, please. Oh, Frank, I couldn't. Take it, he insisted, pressing it into her hand. For the little one. It's a cold night. Emily burst into a fresh round of tears. Thank you, Frank. God bless you. Abigail looked at the guard. Thank you, Mr. Frank, she said. Her voice was flat, but her eyes were not. She met his gaze. She would remember this. Click. They pushed through the heavy glass doors. The air outside was cold and damp. The city was quiet. The gleaming tower of the Harrington building rose behind them, a monument of dark glass. They did not take a cab. A cab cost too much. Frank's $10 would be for bread and milk. They walked the 6 blocks to the bus stop and sat on the cold metal bench. Emily shivered, pulling Abigail close to her. We'll be okay, Abby. I'll find something. I'll call the agency first thing in the morning. Maybe I can get 2, 3 day jobs. It will be all right. Abigail leaned her head against her mother's shoulder. She felt her mother trembling. In her mind, she was calculating. Consulting fee. Waterfront project. Councilman Davies. She was 10 years old. She understood quantum mechanics. She did not understand bribes. Not yet. But she understood that Mr. Harrington had secrets. And she understood that he used his power to hurt people. He hurt her mother. He hurt Mr. Frank, who was afraid of him. And he insulted her grandfather, the man he called a grunt. The bus finally came, rattling to a stop. They were the only ones on it. The ride took 40 minutes. They moved from the clean, wide streets of downtown to the narrow, cracked streets of their neighborhood. They got off and walked 2 blocks to their apartment building. It was an old, 3-story brick building. The paint was peeling. They climbed the stairs to the second-floor apartment. Emily's hand shook as she put the key in the lock. She opened the door. The apartment was small, but it was spotless. A worn-out sofa, a small television, a smell of coffee and old books. A light was on in the kitchen. Emily? Abby, is that you? A man's voice, warm but tired. An older man walked out of the kitchen. He was tall, but he leaned heavily on a wooden cane. He wore simple pajamas and a faded blue bathrobe. This was Michael Grant. He was 72 years old. His hair was snow white, but his eyes were the same deep, sharp blue as his granddaughter's. He had been a captain in the army. He had served 2 tours. He had a pin in his hip and a chest full of medals he kept in a wooden box. He saw Emily's face, red and swollen from crying. He saw Abigail's, pale and set. Emily? What's wrong? What happened? Emily's composure broke again. She fell into her father's arms, her story tumbling out in a rush of sobs and whispers. He found her, Dad, in the library, he said. He said such awful things. He called her. He called me, and he fired me. He fired me, Dad. I don't know what to do. Michael Grant held his daughter. He looked over her head at Abigail, who was standing in the doorway, watching them. His face, usually so kind, hardened. Not with anger, but with a deep, cold sorrow. He had seen men like Walter Harrington before, on battlefields and in boardrooms. Men who confused power with character. Hush, Emily, he said softly, patting her back. It's all right. We're all right. You're home. You're safe. He helped his daughter to the sofa. Let me make you some tea. Abby, go get your mother a blanket from her bed. Yes, Grandpa, Abigail said. She walked down the short hallway. Their apartment had 2 bedrooms. Her mother and grandfather had the rooms. Abigail slept on a small cot in the living room, curtained off for privacy. But her room was a tiny closet she had converted. She went to her mother's room and pulled the heavy quilt from the bed. As she walked back, she passed her own little space. She stopped. She looked at her mother, who was now quietly weeping on the sofa. She looked at her grandfather, who was standing in the kitchen, his back to her, his shoulders set. He was filling a kettle with water. His hand, the one not on the cane, was clenched into a fist. Abigail did not go back to the living room. She ducked behind her curtain. There was a small desk, a reading light, and a shelf. On the shelf were not children's toys, but stacks of books. Old paperbacks, biographies, history, math textbooks she got from the thrift store. She pulled out a simple, spiral-bound notebook, the kind for school. She sat at her desk. She opened to a clean page. She took a pencil. Her hand was perfectly steady. At the top of the page, she wrote, Walter Harrington. Then she began to draw. She drew the flowchart from the whiteboard. H Global. The 3 boxes underneath it. Apex, Clearwater, Nightingale. She drew the arrows. And she drew the box to the side. CD Consulting. Underneath it, she wrote the words she remembered. Councilman Davies. Waterfront Project. Double the consulting fee. She listed the file names she had seen. She listed the dates. She was not a child anymore. She was a witness. She filled one page. Then another. The library in her head was downloading the information. She wrote down every detail she could remember from the past 6 months. The license plates of the expensive cars that visited. The names she heard shouted on the phone. The scraps of paper she'd seen in his wastebasket before her mother emptied it. She was so focused, she did not hear her grandfather approach. Michael Grant stood in the opening of her curtain, leaning on his cane. He had brought her a small glass of milk. He stopped. He looked at the notebook. He saw the diagrams. He saw the names. He was a veteran. He was trained in strategy. He knew what he was looking at. It was not a child's drawing. It was a map. Abigail, he said, his voice very quiet. Abigail jumped, her hand flying to cover the page. It's just me, sweetheart, Michael said gently. He sat on the edge of her cot. It creaked under his weight. He looked at her, his blue eyes searching her face. Your mother told me what he said. About me. Abigail's lower lip trembled. This was the first sign of the child. He said you were a grunt. He said people like us serve. He said it like we were dirt. He is a fool, Abby, Michael said. A man's worth is not in his bank account. It is in his word. In his honor. That man has no honor. He pointed to the notebook. What is this, my girl? Abigail hesitated. Only her grandfather knew about her memory trick. He was the one who helped her manage it. He was the one who told her it was a gift from God. It's his secrets, Grandpa, she whispered. He's a bad man. He hurt Mom. He said you followed orders. But he's the one doing bad things. I think he's a criminal. Michael Grant looked at the page again. He read the name, Councilman Davies. His blood ran cold. Davies. He knew that name. Everyone in the city knew that name. A politician who always seemed to vote in favor of rich developers, while neighborhoods like theirs crumbled. And Project Nightingale. Michael had read about that in the paper. A charity, Harrington Global, was supposedly funding a new hospital wing. Michael had thought it was a good thing. But here it was, linked to Apex Holdings. Linked to CD Consulting. Michael understood. It was not a charity. It was a way to move money. To wash it. He looked at his 10-year-old granddaughter. She had, in one night, uncovered what investigative journalists had been trying to prove for years. Abby, he said, his voice heavy. He placed his large, worn hand over hers. This is very dangerous. You understand that, don't you? He's a bully, Abigail said, her voice small but hard. You taught me to stand up to bullies. I did, Michael said. But this is a different kind of bully. This is a man who can crush people without ever touching them. He looked at Emily, asleep on the sofa, exhausted from crying. He just crushed your mother. I want to crush him, Abigail said. Michael looked at her, startled by the cold fury in her voice. He saw himself in her. He saw that same iron will. Justice is not about crushing people, Abby, he said. It's about balance. It's about making things right. He tapped the notebook. This is just information. It is not proof. Not yet. A child's memory is not enough to stop a man like that. Then we get proof, Abigail said. Michael sighed. He looked around the small, poor apartment. He looked at his brilliant granddaughter. Walter Harrington had made a terrible mistake. He had not just insulted a cleaner. He had not just insulted a veteran. He had given them a reason to fight back. First, Michael said, closing the notebook. We need to survive. Your mother needs a job. We need to pay the rent. We cannot fight a war if we cannot eat. And then, Abigail asked. Michael looked at the notebook, his eyes narrowing. And then, we find someone who knows how to read your map. The next morning, the small apartment was filled with the smell of old coffee and the quiet sound of the television news. Emily Grant was already dressed, her face scrubbed clean, her hair pulled back. She had ironed her best blouse. "I'll call the agency first thing," she said, her voice strained with false optimism. "Mrs. Gable likes me. She'll find me a new placement. Maybe a day shift, so I can be home when you get back from school, Abby." Abigail, sitting at the kitchen table, did not look up from her math homework. She was already working on the 8th grade curriculum. "Yes, Mom." Michael sipped his coffee. He watched his daughter. He knew what was coming. He had seen this kind of power play in the military. A powerful man like Harrington didn't just fire someone. He made an example of them. Emily dialed the number. She stepped into her bedroom for privacy, but the apartment was small. They heard everything. "Mrs. Gable?" "Hello, it's Emily Grant." Her voice was polite, hopeful. There was a long silence. I see," Emily said. Her voice was smaller now. "Mrs. Gable, I promise, it was a misunderstanding. My daughter, she wandered. She didn't take anything. Another silence. Longer this time. "What do you mean?" "Terminated from the roster." Emily's voice cracked. "I've been with you for 3 years. I have never had a single complaint. Not one." Michael closed his eyes. Abigail's pencil stopped moving. "Because of one client?" Emily was crying now. "But Mr. Harrington, that's not fair. I have a child to feed. Please, Mrs. Gable. Please, just don't do this." The click of the phone hanging up was loud in the quiet apartment. Emily walked out of the bedroom. She looked like a ghost. She stared at her father, her eyes wide with a terror that went beyond tears. "He didn't just fire me," she whispered. "He blacklisted me. The agency, they terminated my contract. Severe client complaint. Breach of trust. He ruined me, Dad." She slid into a chair at the table, her hands flat on the surface. "He ruined me." "No, he didn't," Michael said, his voice firm. He put his hand on her shoulder. "He is one man in one city. You are a hard worker. You are an honest woman. You will find something else." "What? What will I find?" she said, her voice rising in panic. "Everywhere asks for references. The agency was my only reference for the last 3 years. He cut my legs out from under me. For what? Because his library was disturbed by a 10-year-old girl." Abigail looked at her mother. She saw the raw, shaking fear. This was not like in the books. In books, the heroes were never afraid of rent. They were never afraid of the electric bill. This, she realized, was what Mr. Harrington had done. He hadn't just used cruel words. He had used his power, like a hammer, to smash her mother's life. Abigail quietly closed her math book. She opened the notebook from last night, the one with the diagrams. She looked at her grandfather. Michael met her gaze. He gave a single, slow nod. "Emily," he said, "you go out. You pound the pavement. You apply at every diner, every grocery store, every hotel in this city. You hold your head high. You are a Grant. We do not break." Emily looked at her father. She saw the steel in his eyes. She took a deep, shuddering breath. She nodded. Okay, I will." She stood up, grabbed her purse, and walked out the door. The moment the door closed, Michael turned to Abigail. "All right, soldier," he said, his voice dropping. "Our turn. Get your coat. We're going to the library." The public library was 10 blocks away. It was warm, and it smelled of old paper and floor polish. It was one of Abigail's favorite places. But today, this was not a visit for pleasure. Michael led her to the computer terminals in the back. "This is our new base of operations, Abby," he said, sitting heavily in one of the plastic chairs. "We have what I call raw intelligence. Your notebook. Now, we need to confirm it. We need to find out who these people are. We need to find a weak link." Abigail sat at the computer. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. She was faster than any of the librarians. "Start with the names you wrote down." Michael guided her, his voice a low murmur. "Councilman Davies and Harrington Global. Search them together." Abigail typed. The screen filled with articles. Pictures of Walter Harrington and a smiling, slick-looking man, Councilman Davies, shaking hands. They were at a press conference for the new waterfront revitalization project. "Mr. Harrington is a pillar of this community," one quote from Davies said. "His generosity is unmatched." Now search Project Nightingale, Michael said. Abigail typed again. The results were fewer. A small website. It described Project Nightingale as a new charitable foundation to build a state-of-the-art children's wing at the city hospital. The project was funded entirely by a generous anonymous donation from a prominent city businessman. An anonymous donation, Michael scoffed. A man like Harrington doesn't do anything anonymously. He wants his name on the building. Unless he doesn't want anyone to know where the money is coming from. Go deeper, Abby, who is on the board of directors for Project Nightingale. Abigail clicked through the site. She found the About Us page. She found the list of board members. It was a short list. A president, a secretary, and a treasurer. Now, Michael said, leaning in. Open a new window. Search for the other companies on your list. Apex Holdings and Clearwater Investments. Abigail searched for Apex Holdings. It was a simple, one-page website. A financial group. She looked at the Our Team page. She found the CEO. She froze. What is it, Abby? Grandpa, she said, her voice barely a whisper. The CEO of Apex Holdings, his name is Robert Shaw. He's the same man listed as the treasurer for Project Nightingale. Michael's eyes lit up with a cold fire. Got him, he breathed. That's the bridge. That's how he's moving the money. Harrington gives the bribe to Davies. Davies, through some channel, donates it to Project Nightingale. The charity then pays Apex Holdings, Harrington's own company, for financial management or construction fees. He's washing it, making dirty money clean. Abigail looked at her grandfather. He's stealing. He's doing worse than that, Abby. He's stealing from the city. He's using a children's hospital to hide it. That is the man who called your mother a servant. Abigail's face was grim. She looked back at the screen. We have the how, Grandpa, she said, echoing his words from last night. But we don't have proof. This just looks suspicious. It's not proof. You are right, Michael said. He stared at the screen, his mind working. He was back on the battlefield, looking for an opening. We are two civilians. We have no power. We have a 10-year-old's memory and a public computer. We can't fight him head-on. It would be a slaughter. So what do? We find an insurgent, Michael said. We find someone who already has weapons, but no ammunition. We need a reporter. Someone who already hates Harrington. Someone he's already hurt. Abigail turned back to the keyboard. She knew what to search for. She typed, Walter Harrington lawsuit reporter. The screen was filled with links. Harrington, it seemed, sued reporters often. But one name kept appearing. A man named David Chun. Chun had been a star investigative journalist for the city's top newspaper, The Chronicle. 3 years ago, he had written a blistering series of articles. He accused Walter Harrington of exactly this, using shell companies and political bribes to secure a massive downtown real estate deal. This is it, Abby, Michael said, his voice urgent. Abigail clicked on the links. The first few articles were explosive. They were filled with accusations. They hinted at sources inside and leaked documents. Then, the articles stopped. The last link was from 2.5 years ago. It was a small, 2-paragraph item on an inner page of the paper. Retraction, the headline said. The Chronicle formally apologized to Mr. Walter Harrington for its unsubstantiated reporting by David Chun. Mr. Chun was no longer employed by the newspaper. He crushed him, Abigail said. Just like he's trying to crush your mother, Michael said. Harrington sued him. He bled him dry. He destroyed his career. He made an example of him, just like he did with Emily. Michael stared at the name. David Chun. This is our man, Michael said. A man with nothing left to lose. A man who wants revenge just as much as we want justice. How do we find him? Abigail asked. A good reporter never really quits, Michael said. He just goes underground. It took another hour. They found him. David Chun was not at the Chronicle anymore. He was not at any paper. He ran a small, independent blog. It looked old. It was just text. He posted about city council meetings, zoning laws, and budget reports. Nobody read it. His headquarters was listed as a P.O. box. But at the very bottom of the page, there was a contact link and a phone number. Michael wrote it down on a scrap of paper. That night, the apartment was dark, except for the dim light over the stove. Emily had returned, her feet aching, her face a mask of defeat. She had handed out 12 resumes. She had filled out 8 applications. Not one person had called her back. She had eaten a small bowl of soup and fallen asleep on the sofa, still in her clothes. Michael sat at the kitchen table. The only sound was the hum of the old refrigerator. He looked at the scrap of paper with the phone number. He looked at Abigail, who was sitting across from him, her notebook open. "Abigail," Michael said, his voice so quiet it was almost a whisper. "You need to understand what we're doing. This is the point of no return. Once I make this call, we are in the fight. It will be dangerous. This man, Harrington, he won't just fire us. He will try to destroy us. All of us. Your mother, too." Abigail looked at her mother, asleep on the sofa. She looked at the past due notice for the electric bill, which Emily had left on the table. "He is already destroying us, Grandpa," Abigail said. Michael looked at her, and his heart ached with a terrible mix of pride and fear. She was his blood. She was a soldier. "You're right," he said. He picked up the old kitchen phone. He took a deep, steadying breath. His fingers, calloused from his cane, slowly dialed the number. It rang once, twice, 3 times. A man answered. His voice was rough, tired, and full of suspicion. "Yeah. Mr. Chun," Michael said. "Mr. David Chun? Who's asking?" "My name is Michael Grant. You don't know me, sir, but I believe we have a mutual acquaintance." There was a silence on the other end. "I'm not a reporter anymore, old man. I don't know what you're selling, but I'm not buying." "I am not selling anything, Mr. Chun," Michael said, his voice hard as iron. "I am offering you something. I'm offering you the man who ruined your life." Another long, heavy silence. "Walter Harrington," Michael said. Abigail watched her grandfather. He was sitting straighter. He was no longer just an old man with a cane. "I'm listening," David Chun said. There was a long, pressurized silence on the phone line. David Chun was breathing, but not speaking. "Mr. Chun," Michael said, "how do I know you're not one of his? How do I know this isn't some trap to sue me again? I've got nothing left for him to take, but I'm sure his lawyers could find something." "You don't know me," Michael said, his voice steady. "But you know him. You know how he operates. You wrote 3 articles about his shell companies. You were right. You just didn't have the final piece. We have it." "Who is we?" Chen asked, his voice sharp with suspicion. "My family. People he hurt because he could. People he underestimated. He hurt a lot of people, Mr. Grant. You're not special. But we're the only ones who have been inside his penthouse for the last 6 months," Michael said. Another silence. This one was different. It was the sound of a hunter's ears perking up. "Where?" Chen finally said. "Tomorrow. 4 o'clock. The City Public Library. The main branch on 5th. History section, 2nd floor. European Theater." "That's very specific." "I am a veteran," Michael said simply. "I like history. I'll be the one with a cane, reading about the Battle of the Bulge. You'll know me. And how will I know you're alone?" "You won't," Michael said. "You'll just have to trust that the man who ruined your life is worth the risk. We'll be there for 20 minutes. If you're not there, we'll find another way." Michael Grant hung up the phone. He did not wait for a reply. He looked at Abigail. Her face was pale in the dim kitchen light, but her eyes were bright. "Now, we prepare," Michael said. "Go to your room. Write it all down. Everything you remember. Names, dates, times. Every number. Do not write your opinions. Do not write what you think. Write what you know. Facts. Like a soldier's after-action report." "Yes, Grandpa," Abigail said. She slipped away. Michael sat at the table for a long time. He listened to his daughter, Emily, stirring in her troubled sleep on the sofa. He was a 72-year-old man with a bad hip. He was about to declare war on the most powerful billionaire in the city. He was terrified, and he had not felt so alive in 20 years. The next day, the library was quiet. The air smelled of dust and old paper. Michael Grant sat on a wooden bench in the aisle marked World War II, European Theater. A thick book about the Siege of Bastogne was open on his lap. He was not reading it. Abigail sat on the floor a few feet away, pretending to read a book on the Roman Republic. She had her spiral notebook tucked inside it. At 4:02 p.m., Michael saw him. He was not the polished, confident reporter from the old newspaper photos. This man looked like he lived in his coat. He was thin, with dark circles under his eyes. His hair was messy. He looked, Michael thought, like a man who had been defeated. David Chin walked past the aisle, his eyes scanning. He looked at Michael. He looked at Abigail. He scoffed, a small, bitter sound, and started to walk away. He had expected a corporate whistleblower, a disgruntled partner, not an old man and a 4th grader. Mr. Chun, Michael called out, his voice quiet but firm. David stopped. He turned around slowly. He walked back, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. Mr. Grant, thank you for coming, Michael said. This is my granddaughter, Abigail. David's eyes flicked to Abigail, then back to Michael. He looked angry. A joke. You're pulling a joke. This is no joke, sir, Michael said. You brought a child into this? What is this, a Make-A-Wish Foundation visit? You want me to write a story about your smart grandkid? I told you, I'm not a reporter. She is the reason we are here, Michael said, his voice dropping to a whisper. She is the source. The source, David repeated, his laugh a harsh, dry sound. The source for what? The cafeteria menu? Get out of my way. He turned to leave. Project Nightingale, Abigail said. Her voice was not loud, but it cut through the dusty air like a knife. David's chin froze. His back was to them. He did not move for a full 5 seconds. Slowly, he turned around. He looked at Abigail. His face was pale. What did you say? Abigail stood up. She was small, but she held herself with a strange, adult stillness. Project Nightingale is the shell company, she said, her voice clear and flat, as if she were reciting a multiplication table. You thought it was a company called Aria Investments when you wrote your article. You were wrong. Aria was a decoy. The real one is Nightingale. It's registered as a 501c3 charity. That's how he's washing the money. David took a step closer. He was not laughing. How do you know that name? I saw the diagrams on Mr. Harrington's whiteboard, Abigail said. He's taking bribes from Councilman Davies for the new waterfront project. But Davies doesn't pay him directly. The bribe money is donated to Project Nightingale. It looks like a clean, charitable gift to build a new hospital wing. David stared at her, his mouth slightly open. How? The money doesn't stay there, Abigail continued, her eyes locked on his. The charity then has expenses. It pays for financial management and construction oversight from a company called Apex Holdings. Apex Holdings is run by a man named Robert Shaw. Mr. Shaw is also listed as the treasurer of Project Nightingale. The money goes in clean and comes out dirty. It's not a donation. It's a laundromat. David leaned against the bookshelf. He looked as if he'd been punched in the stomach. I had Shaw, he whispered. I knew Apex was dirty, but I couldn't tie it to Harrington. I couldn't find the bridge. Nightingale. My God. He looked from Abigail to Michael. Who are you people? I am Michael Grant, Michael said, standing up with the help of his cane. My daughter, Emily, was Walter Harrington's night cleaner. He found my granddaughter in his library. She was reading physics, quantum mechanics, Abigail added quietly. Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. David let out a shaky breath. I've heard rumors about that library. They said he bought it all for show, that he couldn't even understand the titles. He couldn't, Abigail said. It made him angry. He said people like us, my mother, were born to serve. He said my grandfather was just a grunt who followed orders. Then he fired my mother. And he called her agency and had her blacklisted. She can't get a job anywhere. David Chin's face, which had been pale with shock, now flushed with a deep, familiar anger. He recognized the pattern. He had lived it. Harrington didn't just win. He had to annihilate his opponents. He had to ruin them. This is real, David said, his voice low. You are telling me this 10-year-old girl, she memorized all of this? Michael put a hand on Abigail's shoulder. My granddaughter has a gift. She sees something, she never forgets it. She has been in that penthouse for 6 months. She has been listening, watching. She has his entire operation in her head. And, Michael added, in this. He took the spiral notebook from Abigail. He handed it to David. David's hands shook as he opened it. It was page after page. Diagrams, dates, license plate numbers, names of shell companies, full sentences from phone calls Abigail had overheard. It was the raw intelligence Michael had promised. It was the skeleton key to Harrington's empire. This is everything, David whispered. This is what he sued me for. This is the truth. He looked up, and for the first time, the broken, defeated look was gone. His eyes were sharp. The reporter was back. Okay, David said, his voice suddenly crisp and professional. He snapped the notebook shut. Okay, Mr. Grant. Abigail, here is what we do. This is not a news story. We take this to the paper. Harrington's lawyers will tie us in knots before it even hits the press. He owns the publisher. He'll call it the ramblings of a child and a disgraced reporter. We'll be crushed. So what do we do? Michael asked. This isn't journalism, David said, his voice hard. This is a criminal case. We are building an indictment. We are not going to the Chronicle. We are going to the FBI, the Southern District. We are talking wire fraud, public corruption, and racketeering. Michael nodded. We are in your hands, Mr. Chun. Call me David. And we're not ready. Not yet. He tapped the notebook. This is our map. It's perfect, but it's not evidence. A jury can't cross-examine a 10-year-old's memory, no matter how perfect. We need one piece of paper. One hard document that validates everything in this book. We need a bank statement. A wire transfer. An email. How do we get that? Michael asked. David looked at the notebook again. He pointed to one of the names Abigail had circled a dozen times. We go after the weak link, David said. Robert Shaw, the money man, the CEO of Apex and the treasurer of Nightingale. A man like Harrington never gets his own hands dirty. He uses men like Shaw. Shaw is the one committing the fraud. He is the one who will go to prison if this comes out. Harrington will throw him to the wolves to save himself. So we find him? Michael said. We scare him, David corrected. We make him believe the ship is sinking, and Harrington is going to let him drown. We make him understand that his only chance is to turn state's witness. We get him to give us the proof we need in exchange for a lifeline. How? Abigail asked. David looked at the two of them, the old soldier and the child genius. This was the strangest army he had ever seen. I'm going to need to dig, David said. I need to find out where Shaw eats, where he drinks, where he lives. I need to find his weakness. You too. You've done the impossible. You've given us the weapon. Now, you need to let me aim it. Go home. Stay quiet. Do not, under any circumstances, go near that building or anyone associated with Harrington. I will find you. He grabbed the notebook. Can I? She has a copy, Michael said. She made 2 more last night. From memory. David Chin stared at Abigail. He gave a single, astonished laugh. He picked the wrong family to mess with. Yes, sir, Michael said, gripping his cane. He did. For 3 days, the small apartment was silent. Emily Grant went out every morning and came back every evening, her shoulders a little more slumped, her face a little paler. The rejections were piling up. No one would hire a woman blacklisted by Harrington's referral agency. She had started applying for work at fast food chains, but even they seemed wary. Michael and Abigail kept their routine. They went to the public library. They read. They waited. Abigail could see the toll it was taking. Her grandfather's face was etched with worry. He was spending hours on the phone with the Veterans Affairs office, trying to see if he could get an advance on his small pension. He was checking the pantry, counting cans of beans. They were running out of time. They were running out of food. On the 4th night, the phone rang. It was almost 11 p.m. Emily was asleep, exhausted. Michael picked it up. Grant residence. It's me. David Chin's voice was a low, urgent rasp. I've got him. Michael was instantly awake. He motioned for Abigail, who came to his side. What did you find? Michael asked. Shaw. He's not just a criminal. He's a desperate man, David said, speaking quickly. I followed him. He doesn't go to fancy bars. He doesn't have a mistress. He goes to one place. The city hospital. The real one. Not the Nightingale wing. Why? His son. 9 years old. Leukemia. He's been there for 6 months. The treatment. It's experimental. It's astronomically expensive. Harrington isn't just paying Shaw. He's using him. Shaw is trapped. He's been cooking the books for Harrington for 5 years, and I'd bet my life Harrington is holding the medical bills over his head. My God, Michael whispered. He's using a fake children's hospital to hide his bribes, and he's blackmailing a man whose child is actually sick. It's the perfect leverage, David said. And it's our weak point. A man like that is terrified. He's not loyal. He's a prisoner. What's the plan? Michael asked. I'm at the hospital now. In the parking garage. I'm going to confront him when he comes out. This is it, Michael. One way or another, this ends tonight. I needed you to know. Be careful, son, Michael said. David hung up. Abigail looked at her grandfather. Is Mr. Chin going to be okay? He is a good soldier, Michael said. He put his arm around her. Now we pray. The hospital parking garage was cold and smelled of oil. David Chin sat in his rusted 1998 sedan. At 11:32 p.m., Robert Shaw walked out of the elevator. Shaw looked terrible. His suit was wrinkled. He hadn't shaved. He was just a father, hollowed out by grief and fear. David Chun got out of his car. "Mr. Shaw," David said. Shaw spun around, his keys clutched in his hand. "Who are you? What do you want?" "My name is David Chun. I used to be a reporter." Shaw's face went white. I have nothing to say to you. Leave me alone." He fumbled for his keys, trying to unlock his car. "I'm not here for a story, Mr. Shaw," David said, stepping into the yellow light. "I'm here to offer you a way out." "A way out of what?" "I don't know what you're talking about." "Project Nightingale," David said. Shaw dropped his keys. They clattered on the concrete. "Apex Holdings," David continued, his voice calm, almost kind. "Councilman Davies. The waterfront bribes. I know everything, Robert. And soon, everyone will." Shaw began to shake. "You don't know. You can't. Mr. Harrington will destroy you." "He destroyed me 3 years ago," David said. "I have nothing left to lose." "But you do. You have a wife. You have a son. Room 412. Leukemia." Shaw let out a choked sob. "Please, please. He'll cut me off. He pays for the treatment. My son will die. Please, you can't." "He is cutting you off, Robert," David said, stepping closer. "Don't you see? You are the treasurer. You are the CEO. Your name is on every illegal transfer. When this breaks, and it will break, who do you think goes to prison? Him, or the man who signed the checks?" Shaw leaned against his car, his legs giving out. He knew it was true. "He's going to feed you to the wolves," David said. "He will say you were a rogue employee. He will be shocked and appalled. He will walk away. You will go to prison for 20 years. And what happens to your son then? What do you want?" Shaw whispered, tears streaming down his face. "I am not working for a newspaper," David said. "I am working with people who want justice. I'm putting together a case for the FBI, a racketeering case. And right now, I have a file that points to you as the kingpin." "No, I know, but I need one thing to point it at him." David held out his hand. "I need one piece of hard proof. The real ledger. A wire transfer receipt. Something that has his name on it. You give me that, and I give you a lifeline. You become a state's witness. You get immunity. You get protection. You get to save your family. He gets what he deserves." Shaw looked at David's hand. He was weeping. He was a man at the end of his rope. He made me keep a second set of books," Shaw whispered. As insurance. He said it was for taxes, but it's the real ledger. It shows the money coming from Davies and going out to his personal offshore accounts. It's on a USB drive. In my briefcase. "Give it to me, Robert," David said. "And be free." Shaw fumbled with his briefcase. He pulled out a small, black USB drive. He placed it in David's hand. "It's all there," Shaw said. He's a monster." "I know," David said. He closed his hand around the drive. "Go back to your son, Mr. Shaw. Get some sleep. A federal agent will contact you tomorrow morning." David Chin walked away, the small piece of plastic heavy in his pocket. He had him. He had Harrington. 2 weeks later, Walter Harrington stood on the stage of a grand ballroom. It was the annual City Foundation Gala. Hundreds of the city's elite, in tuxedos and gowns, applauded. He was at a podium, accepting the Philanthropist of the Year award for his generous and groundbreaking work-funding Project Nightingale. Thank you. Harrington smiled, his voice smooth. "We, in this room, have a duty to lead, a duty to give back, and I am proud to lead the charge." The applause was deafening. At the back of the ballroom, 2 men in dark blue suits spoke into their wrists. "He's on stage. We're moving in." The main doors of the ballroom swung open. The 2 FBI agents walked in. They were followed by 2 more. They were not in tuxedos. They walked calmly, directly toward the stage. The applause died. The room fell silent. Harrington stopped smiling. He looked confused. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" The lead agent walked up the steps. He was joined by a 5th man, David Chun. Harrington's face turned to stone. "Chun, what is the meaning of this? I'll have you thrown out." "Security." Walter Harrington, the lead agent said, his voice loud in the silent room. "You are under arrest for federal wire fraud, conspiracy to commit bribery, and money laundering." There was a collective gasp from the crowd. "This is outrageous." Harrington shouted. "You have no proof. This hack," he spat, pointing at David, "has been forging lies about me for years." "We don't need his lies," the agent said calmly. He held up a small plastic bag. Inside was the USB drive. We have your ledger. We have all your offshore accounts. And we have the full, sworn testimony of your partner, Mr. Robert Shaw. The color drained from Walter Harrington's face. He finally understood. He had been beaten. The agents pulled his hands behind his back. The sharp, metallic click of the handcuffs echoed through the ballroom. What he did next shocked everyone, David Chin thought, as he watched the billionaire being led off the stage. In a small apartment across town, the television news was electric. Taken away in handcuffs, in front of the city's most powerful people. Walter Harrington, the man who owned this city, is done. Emily Grant sat on the sofa. She was not crying. She was just still. Michael Grant sat beside her, his hand on her back. Abigail sat on the floor, watching the screen. She watched the man who had called her mother a servant, who had called her grandfather a grunt, being put into the back of a police car. He looked small. The news anchor cut to a reporter on the scene. It was David Chun, surrounded by microphones. Mr. Chun, your reporting was just vindicated. How do you feel? David looked into the camera. He looked tired, but he was smiling. I feel like, for the first time in a long time, the right people won. Mr. Harrington made a fatal mistake. He underestimated the people he hurt. He thought they were invisible. He forgot that the people who clean the floors and wait in the kitchens, they see everything. The news anchor came back. An incredible turn of events. A story of greed, corruption, and ultimately, justice. All brought about by an anonymous tip. In the apartment, Michael turned off the television. The room was quiet. Emily let out a long, slow breath. It's over, she whispered. Michael looked at Abigail. He put his hand on her blonde hair. You did it, my girl. Your grandfather is very proud of you. Abigail looked up at him. She thought about Mr. Harrington. She thought about his library, full of books he never read. He was right about one thing, Grandpa, she said. Michael looked at her, confused. What's that, sweetheart? He said the world is divided into two types of people. Abigail picked up her backpack. She pulled out a book from the library. It was not physics. It was a thick, heavy book. The fundamentals of contract law. He was just wrong about which was which, she said. She opened the book, took out a pencil, and began to read. And that's where we'll end the story, with justice served, not by armies, but by a book of contract law in the hands of a child who was never supposed to be there. I hope this gave you a chance to step out of the everyday and just drift for a bit. I'd love to know what you were doing while listening, perhaps with a quiet coffee or settling in for the night. Drop a line in the comments. I really do read them all. And if you want to make sure we cross paths again, hitting like and subscribing makes a huge difference. We're always trying to improve, so feel free to share your feedback below. Thanks for spending this time with me.